About my sophomore or junior year, I kind of started to take notice that I was, might sound egotistical, but kind of special. Every time I walked on the court, pretty much knew I was going to play better than my opponent.
When you ask who was the first Nikola Jokic type player to play in the NBA, a lot of people will say Arvydas Sabonis. And that's fair, as the similarities are there. But about 15 years before Sabonis stepped foot on an NBA court, there was a bulky, mustached big man from New York who could find the open man with ease, push the ball on the fast break, rack up rebounds, and had soft hands. And when he got the ball down low, it was game over. Jeff Ruland was one of the first of his kind, a big center who was a nightly triple-double threat in his short-lived prime. He understood positioning and how to use his wide frame and would catch defenders off guard with a quick first move. And he was more than comfortable getting physical with his man down low. He dominated at Iona, but entered the NBA draft amid controversy, even spending a year playing in Europe before making his NBA debut in the '82 season, as he would quickly become a star for the Washington Bullets and even an MVP candidate. But just as quickly, after reaching his peak, injuries destroyed his body, as he soon struggled to stay on the court before retiring at the age of 28. Years later, he would attempt a comeback, but at that point, his body was even less equipped to handle the NBA, appearing in just 24 games over 2 more seasons. His prime was extremely short, but even as his body failed him, he continued to put up big-time numbers, as during the 1980s, Jeff Ruland was even more of an anomaly than he'd be today. Let's jog your memory. A Bayshore native, Ruland was a man among boys throughout his high school career at Sachem, where he would earn just about every possible individual honor. Standing 6'10" as a senior, Ruland would average over 28 points per game, as well as be named a second-team parade high school All-American, and would earn himself a spot in the inaugural McDonald's All-America game, as he would play alongside a great guard committed to Michigan State named Irvin. But Ruland had committed to a much smaller program. Even though he had his pick of the litter for colleges, he opted to stay close to home and sign with Iona, as it just seemed like a good fit due to him already having some rapport with a lot of their players, and more importantly, it made it easier for his mother to come to his games. So Ruland would be suiting up for the Gales and their young, charismatic coach Jimmy Valvano in 1978. But due to Iona being such a small program, there's little out there of Ruland during his college days. So we'll take an abbreviated look at his time in the NCAA. As a freshman, Ruland played 34 minutes a game and led the team in scoring and rebounding, as he would average 22.3 points and 12.8 rebounds on a very efficient 59.4% shooting, as his arrival led to a noticeably improved Gales offense, who would manage a respectable 17-10 record, but would lose to St. John's in the quarterfinal of the New Jersey-New York Conference tourney. In 1979, Iona had switched it up, as they boasted a much stiffer defense, and although they weren't scoring as much, Ruland continued his dominance, once again leading the team in scoring and rebounding with 20.3 points and 11.3 rebounds per game. And with Ruland using his size and soft touch around the basket, it seemed like he never missed, as he would shoot over 67% this season, and his 68.8 true shooting percentage would be second in the entire nation, as he led Iona to an incredible 23-6 finish and a trip to the school's first ever big dance to take on Penn in round 1. But Iona fell behind by double digits, yet almost staged a comeback. However, they would come up just short, as Ruland finished with 19 points and 15 rebounds on 60% shooting. The Gales fielded one of the best teams in program history in 1980, as a junior Ruland would again lead the team in scoring and rebounding, with 20.1 points and 12 rebounds per game. But this year, he would also lead them with 1.9 blocks, and would shoot over 64% from the field. And after an 11-4 start, they would run the table, winning their final 12, which included a major upset win over second-ranked and eventual national champion Louisville, as Ruland finished with 30 points and 21 rebounds in the game. Iona finished the year ranked number 19 in the nation and would win their first year of the ECACM conference tourney, earning them another tournament bid and a first-round matchup with Holy Cross, as they would get their first tournament win in program history, with Ruland going for 16 points and 9 rebounds. But they would narrowly lose to Georgetown in round 2. And even though Ruland had just 18 points, he shot 8 of 10 from the field. But the Gales had improved every year since Ruland's arrival, so there was no reason to believe his senior year wouldn't be even better. But Ruland never played a senior year, and it was due to a very controversial situation. A day after Ruland announced his intention to return as a senior, the school announced that he had forfeited his final year of eligibility, as he had actually signed with an agent. The year before, the agent in question was Paul Corvino, yet he would deny any agreement with Ruland, and Ruland would do the same. But then later on, Corvino would confirm that there was an agreement, which made him entitled to 10% of Ruland's gross earnings, and he would make it clear that legal action would be taken if anyone tried to remove him as Ruland's agent. But Ruland was more upset with the NCAA, as he would say that they didn't have the young student athlete's best interest in mind. Yet Ruland was no longer one of those student athletes, as come June 10th, he was expecting to hear his name called in the NBA draft. Yet there were concerns about his ability to adjust to the speed of the pro game and his defense. And with a cloud of controversy hanging over his head, he saw the first round come and go while he was still waiting. But then with the second pick of the second round, the Golden State Warriors scooped up Ruland. But the Warriors didn't want Ruland, they just had plans that involved him. So with an agreement in place, they would trade him to Washington, as the Bullets would send them a second rounder in return. But Washington had a crowded front court led by the aging duo of Wes Unseld and Elvin Hayes. And after losing out on his senior year, the last thing Ruland wanted was to be buried on the bench. So with the Bullets' approval, he would head to Europe and sign with FC Barcelona for the 81 season, with his move to Europe also acting as a way to separate himself from all the bad press that he had received. Yet one red flag was that reportedly upon Ruland's arrival, the Barcelona medical staff found some things about his left knee that they were worried about, leading to them adding contract clauses. Ruland had a skill set perfect for European basketball and only became more well-rounded playing against Europe's best talent, but it was more because he had to adjust. Ruland was not a fan of all the soft fouls that were called on him, as he couldn't use his big frame and physicality in a way that he was accustomed to. And although Ruland effortlessly averaged about 21 points and 11 rebounds, he just didn't really want to be there, which led to him neglecting his physical conditioning, ultimately resulting in him failing to finish the league season for Barcelona. And Ruland would later say that the teams in Spain weren't NBA caliber, but they still had talent, and forced him to improve on the weaknesses in his game. And he was back on American soil going into the 82 NBA season, as he was about to show the Bullets and the NBA a rarely seen versatility in a man his size. Elvin Hayes had been traded to Houston, and Mitch Kupchak had signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. And then add in the retirement of Wes Unseld, and the Bullets went from a crowded frontcourt in 81 to being desperate for frontcourt players in 82. Ruland joined a team led by Greg Ballard and would begin his NBA career playing backup to Spencer Haywood. And there was another notable big man on the roster, selected shortly after Ruland in last year's draft, and that was Rick Mahorn, as Ruland and Mahorn would quickly earn the nickname of the Beef Brothers by Washington fans due to their large frames and intimidating physical play, which led to high percentage buckets, aggressive defense, and a whole lot of rebounds, as John Lucas would describe them well, saying that they got all the rebounds and knocked people to the floor. Ruland would appear in all 82 games this season, coming off the bench for every one of them, yet putting up better numbers than Haywood, as Ruland would be the team's second leading scorer and leading rebounder on 56.1% shooting, which would be a top 10 mark in the league. The Bullets were coached by Gene Shue, and as Ruland would say in an interview this year, if you wanted to play for Shue, you were going to have to play defense. So he would finish with one of the 10 lowest defensive ratings in the league. Ruland would join this year's rookie class, leading to him earning a spot on the all-rookie team. But Ruland definitely wasn't playing like a rookie, and as the season went on, he looked more and more like a star, as he would partially attribute his elite production to not having zone defenses swarm over him, like they did in Europe. He would hit double figures in 64 games and record 39 double-doubles. Yet he only received about 20 minutes a game over his first 15 games, as the Bullets would start 4-11. But as Ruland started getting more playing time, the Bullets started winning more, leading to a 43-39 record and a first-round playoff matchup with New Jersey, who Washington would make quick work of in a 2-game sweep, as Ruland averaged 15 points and 12 rebounds on nearly 65% shooting. But round 2 brought the mighty Celtics. Ruland started slow with just 5 points on 2 of 5 shooting in a Game 1 loss, but after this, he really stepped it up. He came back in a Game 2 win to put up 19 points and 10 rebounds. Then in Game 3, he recorded 17 points and 7 rebounds on over 58% shooting, followed by 15 points in Game 4. But he got himself in foul trouble both games, as the Bullets were now down 3-1. Game 5 would be one of the great NBA playoff games, with Ruland putting his stamp all over it, as he would finish with a game-high 33 points along with 13 rebounds and 2 assists, while making 17 trips to the free throw line and converting on 15 of them. And Washington gave Boston all they could handle, but ultimately the Celtics' experience reigned supreme, as they took the game and series in double overtime. But Ruland's rookie year had ended with him averaging about 14.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. 1983 would see an increased role for Ruland as Haywood struggled with injuries. Ruland began coming off the bench, but an early season injury to Haywood would force him into the starting lineup from early November to late December, as Ruland would respond with improved production while maintaining his efficiency. Haywood came back and Ruland returned to the bench, but then more injuries and eventual retirement for Haywood would put Ruland back into the starting lineup for the rest of the season in late February. And in this time, he would up his numbers even more, as his final 28 games were on par with the best big men in the league. And overall for the season, Ruland would finish as the team's leading scorer and rebounder, even though he came off the bench for 32 of his 79 games. And on the defensive end, he would finish with a career-best 97.6 defensive rating, as he and his fellow beef brother Rick Mahorn each finished with a top 10 defensive rating. Offensively, Ruland would hit double figures in 76 games and record 47 double-doubles, and again finished top 10 in the league in field goal percentage. The Bullets hadn't really gotten worse, but they also didn't get better, finishing with a 42-40 record. But this season they would miss out on the playoffs, as Ruland's second year had seen him average about 19.5 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. But once the 1984 season came around, Ruland would finally be a full-time starter, and he would put the league on notice. The Beef Brothers were in full effect in 1984, as they would each shoot above 50% from the field, and both finished top 15 in defensive win shares. Mahorn contributed more on the defensive end, but Ruland had things completely under control on the offensive end. The third-year center would play and start in 75 games, receiving a league-leading 41.1 minutes per game, while leading the Bullets in scoring and rebounding on a 57.9% shooting clip, which would be the 6th highest in the league. His 22.2 points and 12.3 rebounds were both career highs, as he would also be a top 3 rebounder in the league. And he was one of the best at getting to the line, finishing top 3 in free throw attempts as well. He would start the season with 52 straight games in double figures, and overall have just one game where he failed to score at least 10 points, as this season would include his career high of 38 points on 16 of 20 shooting to go along with 16 rebounds in a November 25th defeat of Detroit. He would rack up 57 double-doubles and even have 2 20-20 games, which included a 25-point and career-high 24-rebound performance in a February 7th defeat of Houston. Additionally, he would record 2 triple-doubles, which included a career-high 12 assists to go along with 18 points and 13 rebounds in an April 3rd defeat of Indiana. So Ruland was an undeniable star and would be recognized as such, earning his first All-Star appearance. But better than that, he would finish top 10 in MVP voting. Defense was still the Bullets' strong suit, and they needed it, as they were one of the league's lowest scoring teams, leading to them finishing with a 35-47 record. But this was still enough for the final playoff spot in the East and a first-round matchup with Boston. Although Boston would win in 4 games, this was a surprisingly close series, as no game was decided by double digits, and 2 of Boston's 3 wins were by just 3 points. Ruland was the focal point of a well-balanced Bullets scoring attack, and although he would shoot just 8 of 18 from the field in Game 1, he finished with a 17-point, 13-rebound, 10-assist triple-double. Game 2 would see him finish with 16 points, yet also add 10 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals. But the Bullets had dropped both, and were facing elimination going back to Washington. But Ruland would keep them alive with a game-high 33 points on over 59% shooting, along with 13 rebounds and 5 assists in a 3-point win. But in Game 4, Washington would be on the other end of a 3-point win. Yet Ruland still finished with a game-high 30 points and a game-high 15 rebounds, along with 5 assists. So Washington's season was over, but Ruland had finished the year with averages of about 22 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Yet although no one knew it yet, they had just seen the peak of Jeff Ruland. The 85 season started as expected. After leading the league in minutes last year and playing nearly 47 minutes per game in their playoff loss to Boston, Ruland continued as the Bullets' workhorse, and the Bullets had made some offseason moves to try and give him more help. They upgraded at guard, when they sent a package headlined by Ricky Sobers to Seattle for former All-Star Gus Williams. And prior to that, they had acquired a great scoring big man from Cleveland in Cliff Robinson. And finally, their top draft pick from a year ago, Jeff Malone, took a huge step forward in year 2. Each of these players would produce well, but part of it was due to an extended absence from Ruland. It was business as usual for Ruland to begin the season. His numbers had dropped slightly, but the Bullets had more mouths to feed, and Ruland was still shooting nearly 57% from the field, and was dishing a then career-high 4.4 assists per game, as over his first 36 games of the season, he had recorded 22 double-doubles and 1 triple-double, as he was again named to the All-Star team. But he didn't appear in the game, as on January 14th, he injured his shoulder against Cleveland and would miss the next couple weeks before attempting to return on February 1st. But his shoulder was far from healed, as after one game, he would again sit out, this time for the remainder of the season. Luckily, the Bullets were able to survive without Ruland, as they would finish with a 40-42 record and get a playoff matchup with Philadelphia. And although he needed cortisone shots to play, Ruland returned for the first round series. Ruland was far from 100%, but he was giving it all he had, as he played over 40 minutes per game. Game 1 would see him put up 20 points, 10 boards, 7 assists, and 4 steals in a loss. Then Game 2 would see him struggle, with just 12 points on 5 of 12 shooting, but he again recorded 4 steals. Yet now the Bullets were down 0-2. Ruland had his best performance in Game 3, with 25 points on 11 of 15 shooting, along with 7 rebounds and 5 assists, as Washington would get the win, but their season ended 2 nights later. Yet Ruland still put up 13, 10, and 7 in 45 minutes of action. But his injury-riddled season ended with him averaging about 19 points, 11 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. During the offseason, Ruland underwent surgery on his shoulder and was expected to be ready for the beginning of the '86 season. But one thing missing was McNasty, aka Mahorn, who had been traded to Detroit for Dan Roundfield in the offseason. As the Beef Brothers were no more, Ruland came out of the gate looking good, as over his first 20 games, he was averaging about 21 and 12 on over 58% shooting. And although he had missed a couple games due to a bruised shin, it was no big deal, but it was foreshadowing, as the injury bug had worked its way down to his lower half this season. And beginning in mid-December, he would miss 22 straight games with ankle problems. Then after a 3-game return, another ankle injury would force him out for 5 more games. But then came the dreaded knee issues, as a knee strain would keep him out for most of March. He returned for 2 more games in late March, before making the call to have arthroscopic surgery on his left knee a little over a week later. And even though Ruland would only play in 30 games this season, he would finish with the highest assists average among centers. So Ruland had spent more time on the injury report than on the court. Yet Washington again got by without him, as their 39-43 record landed them a rematch with Philly. The Bullets would go down 2-1 in what was a very close series, and then in Game 4, Ruland returned, just a few weeks post-surgery, and although he was moving gingerly, he came through with an all-around performance in his first game back, as he would finish with 13 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists in 26 minutes off the bench, as the Bullets would even the series, and go back to Philly for the series-deciding Game 5. Ruland would again be effective with 15, 5, and 5, while making 9 of 10 from the charity stripe, but the Sixers won in a blowout to send Washington packing, as another injury-filled season for Ruland had seen him average about 19 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists per game. But big changes were coming for the big man going into the offseason. In a surprising move that has gone down as one of the worst trades in Sixers history, Philly sent Moses Malone, Terry Catledge, and 2 first-rounders to Washington for Ruland and Cliff Robinson. As Classic Rock Beagle on YouTube would call this the offseason of destruction for the Sixers. And although it was a lot to give up regardless, this would have been a decent trade if Philly was getting the Ruland of a couple years prior, but they would barely get any Ruland at all. The Sixers were in the tail end of their great 80s teams, yet still featured Julius Erving, who would retire after the season, a still effective Mo Cheeks, and their star of the future in the 3rd year Charles Barkley. Ruland was in the starting lineup come opening night, and hopes were high, but by the 3rd game of the season, he was in a suit on the bench. He had strained his back and had also struggled with mobility in his surgically repaired knee. But the Sixers were optimistic. He just needed more time to let his knee heal. Ruland would take about 2.5 months before returning to the lineup in mid-January. But 3 games later, he was back in street clothes, again due to his knee. as it had been determined that he had irreparable cartilage damage and would miss the rest of the season for a 45-37 Sixers team who lost to Milwaukee in round 1, as Ruland's year had ended with him averaging about 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Sixers fans got the worst possible news in mid-June, as Ruland would officially announce his retirement. He had re-injured his knee during preseason training and underwent another surgery, and after this, he failed to pass his physical, as GM John Nash said that he can no longer meet the physical requirements to play NBA basketball, and Ruland had no choice but to retire, as the former MVP candidate was still 6 months shy of his 29th birthday. But was that really the end of Jeff Ruland in the NBA? Well, not quite. Ruland had no cartilage left in his knee, but during the years after his retirement, surgical advancements were made, and Ruland was able to undergo a groundbreaking new type of surgery, which would use scar tissue to help replace and regenerate cartilage in his left knee. And after he healed, he started training for an NBA comeback, which was announced early in the '92 season. And then, after nearly 5 years away from the NBA, Ruland made his return for the Sixers on January 8th versus Houston, scoring 9 points off the bench. And this wasn't the Ruland of old, but at 34 years old and not having played since 1987, it wasn't bad. But then just 10 days later, Ruland would injure his Achilles, reportedly due to a Boston Celtics employee slamming a luggage cart into his legs. He would try to play through it, but after a couple games, he would be sidelined for 2 months. And although he returned late March for a few games, it was a bitter end to a comeback season, which saw him average about 4 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half an assist per game. Over the summer, Ruland would undergo surgery on his injured right Achilles. Then shortly before the season started, he would strain his left Achilles. So on November 4th, the Sixers would give Ruland his walking papers. But he got another chance right before the new year, as an injury to center Olden Polynice left the Pistons thin at the center position. So they would sign Ruland for insurance, as he would appear in 11 of their next 13 games. But once Polynice returned, Ruland was waived, as in his 11 games he had averaged about 1 point and 1.5 rebounds per game. And this was the true end to Ruland's playing career, although he would be seen back on the Philadelphia sidelines, this time as an assistant coach, spending a year with the Sixers and working closely with rookie Sean Bradley, before taking up a job at his alma mater, where he would remain until 2007, until taking a few more coaching gigs over the next half-decade, and in more recent years, bringing back the Beef Brothers through a podcast with Mahorn. Jeff Ruland never lacked confidence. Through all the injuries and the early controversy, he still believed he was one of the best, and the frustrating thing about that is that he really was, and likely would have still been had he been healthy. You could make the argument that he could have taken his fitness more serious, but anybody of his size and build is going to be at risk of lower body injuries. And his unfortunately came during a time when surgical progression was nowhere close to what it has become. Ruland was a transcendent big man. He was tough and physical and loved banging in the post like all the bigs before him. But he also brought shooting, dribbling, and passing that wouldn't become common in big men for another 30 to 40 years. He was a beast in college and likely would have been a first-round pick if not for the agent controversy. Yet his year in Europe may have provided Ruland with some of the skills which made him so special in the NBA. He was well on his way to being mentioned among the greatest big men of all time, before everything started breaking down. Yet whenever his body felt well enough to play, he still put up great numbers. Then while many could have rode off into the sunset, Ruland took a chance on a risky surgery if it meant he could play again. He was a special talent, and when looking at what's valued in a modern-day big man, you need to give credit to Ruland for being an originator. But that's it for today's episode on Jeff Ruland. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Sixers teammates, or this one on a player he coached in Philadelphia. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.